Last week, I went to Planet Comic-Con here in Kansas City, and while it was really fun and I had an absolute blast, I was too caught up in the fun of it all to actually record any B-roll or any sort of video at all from the event, so there won't be much B-roll or anything in the video. On the merchant floor, my friend and I came across a booth ran by SKG Retrogaming, which I guess is short for The Skeptical Geek. It's run by a guy named Patrick, who sells these things at cons and on his website, skgretrogaming.com. I don't suggest you go there or harass him. Rather, like most wild animals, we are going to investigate, observe, discover, take only photographs, and leave only footprints. Or, if you're feeling particularly cynical, we'll examine him like a disease. Put him in quarantine. Social distance. Fucking, I don't know. Avoid him like the plague. Patrick bills these things as
multi-system retro boxes,
and claims that there are miniature retro consoles that can run all sorts of games from over 20 different consoles, and more than 7,000 total games. That sounds amazing, right? Several thousand retro games, one tiny package, and HDMI? It's every gamer's dream! It looked really, really cool until I saw the price. And then, thought about it. See, it's like this. The basic box bundle that comes with the system, 2,600 games for the Atari 2600, NES, SNES, and Sega Genesis, with 2 SNES-style controllers, a power supply, and an HDMI cable, costs $250. And that's just the show price he was asking for at the con. On his website, he sells it for $299. The prices go up from there, adding more and more games and more consoles, and the Ultra Box that he sells, which comes with 8,000 games, including 350 PlayStation and 160 Dreamcast games, will set you back $450 at the con, or nearly $500 online. Yeah, I'm not fucking around, you heard me right. $500. You could buy a whole Nintendo Switch or a PS5 for that price. But here's the real kicker. He's not selling some custom homebrew console that he designed himself and painstakingly built into little custom shells that look like tiny SNES consoles. No, what he's really selling is actually just an off-the-shelf Raspberry Pi loaded with readily available, free and open source piece of software called RetroPie, which is a suite of emulation software and tools used to play emulated games on a Raspberry Pi and a bunch of game ROMs. Now, to give Patrick credit where credit is due, he does readily admit this on his website, and I at least admire some semblance of transparency, but this still doesn't exactly absolve him of his shady practices. If you're not familiar, a Raspberry Pi is a small, credit card-sized single-board computer that is popular with hobbyists, programmers, and prototypers because it affords pretty versatile and relatively powerful computing power in such a small package. On top of that, the Raspberry Pi is designed to be affordable. The original model was designed to be sold for $35, but current models go anywhere from $40 to $70, depending on the model and the feature set. This one here is a Model 3B Plus, which at the time that I got it was the newest model available, and it set me back about $40 for just the board. I bought it with the sole purpose of building it into a RetroPie system to play retro games. So, along with the board, I also bought a case, a power supply with a switch, and some Bluetooth and USB controllers to use with the games. As an aside, the power supply with a switch is actually kind of a handy feature. The Pi runs off of a standard micro USB power supply, and without a switch, you'd have to unplug the damn thing to turn it off. So this way, I can actually reach back and press a button to get the system to turn on like a real console. So let's break down the price of what I paid to build my console and compare that to what Patrick charges to just buy his. I paid $40 for the computer, I got the special USB power supply for like $8, and a generic sort of nondescript black case for about $8 off Amazon. If I wanted a case to look like an old system, I could pay more for one, but it doesn't have to look like a retro console to play the games. I also have a 64GB micro SD card in it to hold the software and games, which goes for about $10 new. As for controllers, I primarily use a Wii U Pro controller that I bought used at a GameStop back in 2015 that I'd already been using to play Wii U games. You can get these used for anywhere from 15 to 30 bucks, or new old stock for a little bit more, but I think $30 sounds close enough to what I paid for it and what it consistently goes for today. So in total, I paid about $96 all said and done. You can absolutely get away with paying far less if you're willing to buy cheaper USB controllers, have a micro USB cable laying around, and already have a spare micro SD card. For just the computer and the case, you'd be paying less than $50. So you might be thinking, well, the extra cost must come from the games, right? There has to be some hassle involved with putting all the games on the system. If you're familiar with emulators, I'm sure you know what a ROM file is. It's the file that contains the actual game. Generally, you can find these online from places like Emu Paradise or free ROMs, and the actual legality of downloading and emulating copyrighted video games is certainly a legal gray area that I won't go into here, but this basically means that for every game you want to find, you might have to search around online for a bit before finding the ROM that you want. At the scale of the total game list that Patrick is selling, sure, it is a hassle manually searching, downloading, and installing all 8,000 games he's claiming is on his most expensive system. I even asked Patrick at the con why the systems are priced the way he priced them, and he said that he went through the hassle of finding and downloading all of those games himself. But let's think a little bit about that claim too. We tend to have a vision of these older 8 and 16-bit consoles as something of a golden age, and yeah, the best of the best do hold up. But just about anybody who's reviewing a piece of gaming history on YouTube knows just how much crap is on every console of the classic era. Bad games. Terrible games. Come on, you've seen the Angry Video Game Nerd. They're shitty games. Games that are never re-released, not because of draconian trademark laws, but because they're more or less ephemera. Made to serve a purpose as shelf filler for a few years before nobody ever thought about them again. Now, we're not talking about hidden gems like 3D World Runner, or even curiosities like Race Driver on the Super Nintendo that you might want to go back to as a piece of archaeology. I mean like Mahjong games, crappy baseball simulators, lazy mascot platformers, things that nobody has any nostalgia for. Those kind of games are inflating these systems' roster because at first, having 7,000 games sounds like a real blessing. But really, you'll be lucky if there are even 2,000 that you really want to play. Oh, he's advertising this like it's a plus, too. Like, you would get some extra cred by saying, hey, I'm going to be selling milk jugs full of vodka. Sure, most of it's water, but there's vodka in there. Now, he's saying that, but with unironic, unabashed confidence. Now, look, I'm not saying that I'm against preserving the entire libraries of these systems. No, far from it. But there's not a lot you gain from packing a few gigabytes of shovelware onto a hobbyist computer and selling it for the price of a new, fully featured console. See, there are packs of ROMs out there that filter the monstrous game libraries of each system into more manageable and, to be honest, more enjoyable collections. In fact, my RetroPie setup uses one of these packs. It's called Bud's 64GB All-Killer No Filler, and will almost fill the SD card with 3,400 plus games. It's not the 8,000 that Patrick is selling, but Bud's has also made a 128GB version, and there are other ones available. See, but ultimately, Patrick does not own the intellectual property rights or copyright associated with any of the games he's including in his systems. If he's using a ROM pack from someone like Bud's or from someone else, he's essentially profiting off of someone else's hard work they put in to compile the list. Hard work that the people who compiled these ROM packs put out for free. He's either charging for work he doesn't need to charge for at best, or at worst is passing off other people's work as his own. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'll go with the former, that he did indeed painstakingly compile and put together a ROM pack all by himself that he puts on the consoles that he sells. But I still have two problems with that. Number one, he still doesn't own any of the games he's selling, so he's for sure committing piracy by making a profit off of pirated games. Number two, why go through all that when you can do it yourself for far cheaper? I think my main gripe I have is that I'm not sure the entire process of buying a Raspberry Pi, putting it together and installing a ROM pack full of games is equivalent to $354 in labor. Now let's say it takes him 8 hours to compile a ROM pack himself. That's $44.25 an hour. And for what? Downloading games off the internet? Something that anyone with an internet connection can do for free? It just doesn't make sense. Ultimately, the point of this video comes down to the old adage, buyer beware. I personally like to think these kinds of swindlers are the last gasps of a dying problem for us. Maybe even 20 years ago, his pitch might have been eaten up, and he could have made a fortune turning these boxes out on convention floors. We don't really crave convenience on a wide scale like we used to. The interest he seemed to be getting at Planet Comic-Con was tepid at best. I know that I can get some enjoyment out of my Raspberry Pi box because I'm the one who made it. And most of you watching this probably have the tools to make one of your own too. And you can probably put together a game selection that makes sense for you, that encompasses your all-time favorites, or a specific genre, or a part of the world, or even a time period. So we can just forget about rewarding people like this guy. We're trying to get by doing as little as possible for a big return. After all, what's the difference between that and the Soldier game?